All right. Welcome, everybody. Thanks so much for joining this evening. My name is Christiana Dominguez. I am the director of the Sacramento Regional STEM Fair. And let's start off with the most important fact of the evening. We have a date for this year's fair. It will be Saturday, March 13th, 2027. We'll be holding it this year at St. Francis High School in Sacramento. We'll have a lot more space than we did last year. We've got plenty of room to grow, so we are hoping that you will send us all of your eligible students to participate this year. Just a couple of housekeeping items before we get started. Like I said before, we'll email the slide deck to everybody who registered to attend this Zoom, and we'll make it available later this week on our website. If you can hold your questions until the end, that would be great. You can also put them in the chat box, and we'll go back to the chat box to check them out. I may not see them right away in the chat box because it's just me running this Zoom, but do write them down as you go. The information in this is subject to change. We've done our best to make sure everything is set in stone. The things that won't change are the fair date and location. Again, that's March 13th at St. Francis High School in Sacramento. And we also encourage everybody to review the student handbook and policies as well as the ISEF rules. All right, so let's dive in. So who are we? The Sacramento Regional STEM Fair is a program of the Northern California STEM Education Foundation. We are an independent nonprofit organization that's been around since about 2001. We are the region's only ISEF and CSEF affiliated STEM fair. I'll talk a bit more about what each of those things are later in the presentation. And we're a research-based STEM fair. So the definition of research, which won't be new to any of you, but may be new for some of your students, is that it's a process by which people discover or create new knowledge about the world they live in. So students may design research projects that provide quantitative data through experimentation, followed by analysis and application of that data. So what's a STEM fair project? Well, there are basically two kinds. We've got science projects, where students will design and conduct an experiment to test a hypothesis, or an engineering design project, where students will design, build, and test a solution to address a specific problem or need. Not permitted as part of our fair will be projects that are merely demonstrations, right? So no volcano projects, library research or informational projects, explanation models, or kit building from something that has been pre-prepared or not appropriate for research-based science fairs. Who can participate? So our eligibility rules are as follows. To participate in our competitive divisions, every participating student, including each one on a team, must meet our eligibility requirements. Students must be in grades 6 through 12 and less than 20 years of age as of May 1st, 2027. And they must either attend a brick and mortar, private, public, or homeschool in one of our eligible counties, or be enrolled full-time in an online middle or high school program and reside in an eligible county. So projects from outside of our service area are only accepted if Regenera and ISEF affiliated fair is not available in that county. County school and residence requirements shall be strictly enforced, and missing a deadline in a student's home or school county doesn't create eligibility for our fair. Our eligible counties are as follows: Amador, Butte, El Dorado, Placer, Plumas, Sacramento, San Joaquin, Shasta, Solano, Sutter, Yolo, and Yuba. Students who register with our fair agreeing not to compete in any other ISEF affiliated fairs. Students who are found to compete in any other ISEF affiliated fair during the same fair year will be immediately disqualified from our fair, and or depending on the date of discovery would forfeit their California State Science and Engineering Fair or ISEF finalist status. We have published a flowchart this year to help students determine whether or not they are eligible to participate. This is linked in the slides that will be sent to you and is available in our handbook as well. Experimentation dates for our projects this year. Oh, sorry, that's in the wrong place. Let me skip that slide and come back to it. California State Engineering and Science Fair eligibility is open for all of the students in our participating counties except for San Joaquin and Solano County students. There are San Joaquin and Solano County fairs, and through an agreement between these counties and us and SRSEF, San Joaquin and Solano County students, if attending or being a finalist for the California State Science Engineering Fair is a priority for them, should enter through the San Joaquin or Solano County fairs. Students from these counties, however, may qualify for ISEF via the Sacramento Regional STEM Fair. And new in 2027, students from Butte County may now qualify for California State Engineering and Science Fair via the Sacramento Regional STEM Fair, because there is no more Butte County fair through which they can qualify. So if you are or know of any educators in Butte County and the Chico area that may want to send students to our fair, please encourage them to do so. All right, let's talk about project experimentation dates. When should students be working on their research? What can be included? So for projects that don't require pre-approval, and I will be talking extensively about what that means in a moment, that can include no more than 12 months of continuous research and may not include any research performed before January 1st, 2026. For projects that do require pre-approval, experimentation may not begin before the date the student receives approval from the scientific review committee. And any project that evidences experimentation before January 1st, 2026 or prior to the date of SRC approval as applicable shall be disqualified. For students who are performing continuation projects, we would encourage them to look at the ISEF rules for the process with those. Let's talk a bit about project deadlines for this year. We have a different structure this year. This is new for 2027. We have 2 dates for projects that require pre-approval, and we will go through what projects require pre-approval in a moment. The deadline to register the project is November 13th, 2026. Again, that deadline for projects requiring pre-approval is November 13th. Projects not requiring pre-approval may be registered through January 31st. Our pro tip to you that you can pass on to your students, however, would be to set an earlier internal or on-campus deadline for any students that you are assisting, mentoring, or overseeing in this project, or if you have projects that are a part of a research class or other organization on campus, or to focus on the November 13th deadline. Because if a student mistakenly thinks they don't need pre-approval, but they do, they're going to be out of luck by the time they get to January 31st. Very important. As you can see by the all caps and red ink on this slide, registration is required prior to experimentation or design build. Students must complete the registration process before they break out a test tube or a petri dish or any piece of engineering design equipment. They must complete registration. This is because there are signatures that will be required from the student's parent or guardian, their adult sponsor, or a qualified scientist were required prior to their beginning experimentation. So at this point, no student should have just finished everything. It would be a little bit early for that. They need to get the registration form in before they get started. For projects where pre-approval is required, approval, not just registration, but affirmative approval by our scientific review committee is required prior to experimentation or the build. This does not apply to all projects. So when does it apply? If you're not sure how many forms you need, we encourage, again, before anything takes place, all students should review the STEM Fair handbook for this year and the project registration worksheet, use our pre-approval flow chart and the ISEF rules wizard and ask questions. This flow chart might be a bit hard to see on your screen, but the link will be provided in what we sent out after the call. But in short, any project that is going to involve human subjects, so interviewing people, observing them, surveying them, or anything to do with humans, even if it's the only human that is tested on is the student themselves, that's a human participation project that requires pre-approval. Any project that deals with vertebrate animals, So mammals, fish, birds, reptiles, and for our purposes, cephalopods also count as vertebrates. Uh, Aside from purely observational studies, require pre-approval. So your student can sit in a field and count the birds. If your student is going to touch the birds, that project requires pre-approval. The use or of any potentially hazardous biological agents like microorganism samples collected from the environment, our DNA, things like that, that requires pre-approval. The use of any human or vertebrate tissues requires pre-approval. And the use of any potentially hazardous chemicals, activities, or devices requires pre-approval. And I would say that final one is the one that may trip up the most students. For example, if the student wants to collect puddle water after the rain, that's a potentially hazardous biological agent could be in there. There could be hazardous chemicals. If they're using chemicals at home or in a lab setting, that also could be, depending on what's being used and how it's being used, it could be hazardous. So we strongly encourage students to err on the side of the earlier deadline. So what can students be doing right now before they register? Well, now is the time for research. So students should be reviewing the handbook and project registration worksheet. They should be researching a topic that they're interested in, seeing what experimentation has gone on in the past, what's the current state of science. They should be tracking their research for their bibliography. They can be lining up their supporting adults, and they can be drafting their research plan. For students that are totally new to science fair, where could they find ideas? So first, as a threshold issue, project ideas, designs, plans, experimentations, and work product must all be the student's own. You can certainly help them focus and zero in on something that's of interest to them, but the idea and the project should be the student's own. Students are required to disclose help they receive from others. We don't expect students to not have any help, but they have to say who is helping them. Support may come from teachers or outside mentors. We live in a research-rich region. We have CSUs, we have UC Davis, we have community colleges, we have secondary school campuses with good science facilities. So students who need support beyond their own campuses are encouraged to research their topic, zero in on their hypothesis or design ideas, and then with parent or guardian permission and supervision, reach out to potential qualified scientists or other supportive adults to serve as mentors. Let's talk a bit about the registration process itself. We have revised it for 2027 and made improvements. So there are 3 basic steps to registration and participation this year. The first is to create a student account. The second is to register the project. And most of the common ISEF forms or participation forms that need to be submitted this year will be completed online, which means that students will spend less time downloading and filling out a PDF and keeping track of loose paperwork, and more time focusing on their project. So the first step is to create a student account. Each student must create this before they register their project. And for team projects, so projects can be completed by an individual student or by teams of up to 3 students. For students who want to work in a team, in a duo or a trio, each member of that team must complete the student account creation first. This form is meant to be completed by the student with their parent or guardian because it will gather a signature from each of them. It gets their contact information, their parent guardian email, their teacher email, and will have the parent and student sign off on our FAIR policies. A quick note on student email addresses that I'm sure you are all familiar with. School email addresses routinely reject our emails because we do not have an email at your school. This is mainly an issue for our middle school students who only have their middle school email accounts. And while middle school may be young to open their own personal email, we encourage them to talk with their parents and consider opening their own email account. Our FAIR communicates primarily via email. And should the student qualify for SRSEF or ISEF or the Thermo Fisher Junior Innovator Challenge, and more on that in a moment, important information from those organizations gets communicated directly to the students via email. So it's really important that they have an email address where they can receive correspondence from us and related organizations. Once a student completes the student account creation, they will receive 2 confirmation emails, one that has a record of the information they submitted and one with their student ID number. So we created student ID numbers this year as part of our registration process because we do occasionally, actually every year, have 2 students with the same name. And that could be a bit confusing in the registration process. So each student will have a unique student ID number that they can keep and use for their project registration. And it will also provide links to things like the handbook and our policies, ISEF rules, and all the materials that students should review before they begin their project. This form is open now, and any student who's interested, I encourage them to create their student account now. Obviously, it doesn't obligate them to do anything, but that way, when they're ready to do their project registration, they can just begin. Also new this year, we have created a project registration worksheet. This is a Google Doc. It is not submitted to anyone else. It is just a working template to walk students through everything that is in our project registration form and give them a chance to make a copy of this and use it to draft their responses. This way you don't have to start a project registration and then abandon it. You can look at everything that is there. We provide templates for each kind of project. So science project, engineering design project, the questions for human participant projects and things like that. It has plenty of links to additional resources as well. So we encourage students to take advantage of this. Students choose a category in which to compete. We don't release category registration metrics, so we can't tell you how many people have registered in chemistry versus biology and health sciences in a given year. But some categories are more competitive than others, but which one those are vary wildly from year to year. Just are available in the handbook and the project registration worksheet for what all falls within each category. But we have 4 categories in scientific process. Those are behavioral and social sciences, chemistry, biology and health sciences, and physical sciences and math. And we have 3 categories under engineering design process, which are applied engineering, sustainable technology, and computer software and technology. So after students have created their student account, they are ready to move on to project registration. The student, we only need one of these forms from a team. So if you have a team of students, a duo or a trio, they should decide between them who is going to act as the lead student, which just means who is filling out the forms. That's not a qualitative commentary on who does more work. Hopefully, they all are sharing the work equally to be a team. But one student will complete this form. We only need this form once per project. But the student completing the form will need to know their email address and the email addresses of their teammates, as well as their own parent guardian email address and any teammate, guardian, parent or guardian email addresses, the email address of their adult sponsor, and where required, the email of their qualified scientist. So who are all these people that I just mentioned? Let's review. Student researcher is the easiest one to guess. That is the student completing the project who's responsible for all of their research. Every project needs to have an adult sponsor. The adult sponsor works with the students to evaluate any possible risks to ensure that our students are safe while they're conducting their research. They are going to review the student checklist and research plan. And the adult sponsor can be a teacher, parent, professor, or other professional scientist. And this person should have close contact with the student throughout the timeline of the project. Qualified scientist is required for some projects and is responsible for reviewing the ISEF rules and approving the student's research plan or engineering designs prior to the start of experimentation. So this qualified scientist is required for those special situation projects like human participant projects, those with potentially hazardous biological agents or hazardous materials, or projects involving vertebrate animals. They need to have some level of expertise in that subject area that the student is working in. And they're going to provide direct supervision throughout the timeline of the project or coordinating with a direct supervisor. So a direct supervisor is an alternate person who's there to directly observe what the student is doing. Does that mean a student needs 4 people to participate? Not necessarily. The same person may serve as the adult sponsor, qualified scientist, or direct supervisor if they're required and if they're qualified to serve in those roles. There are more details about the responsibilities and the duties of these folks that are listed on the ISEF page that is linked here. And if you have any questions, you can definitely ask us. The bottom line is not every project is going to require a qualified scientist. They all require an adult sponsor, and frequently, especially for our middle school projects, a parent or a teacher can serve as the adult sponsor. We have a new form process this year. So the most common forms that required printing, signing, scanning, and uploading PDFs last year can now be completed online. Our adult sponsor, qualified scientist, and parent guardians will receive an email notifying them of their status and providing them with a copy of project registration and a link to the forms that they need to complete. Why are there so many forms? Well, the basis of this fair, along with all ISEF affiliated fairs, are preserving and protecting student health and safety, and ensuring that all of our student researchers are maintaining the highest levels of honesty and integrity in the process. We believe that learning to research the process of conducting their project and adhering to the requirements are all part of the soft skills that students learn by participating in the fair. It teaches responsibility, project management, attention to detail, and the important skill of asking for help when you need it. We don't assume any students will automatically know what to do. That's why we're here to answer questions. These forms ensure the students are designing and completing safe projects with appropriate supervision. And all of these forms are required by ISEF, both for ISEF finalists themselves and those who participate in ISEF affiliated fairs. We also send this information to the California State Science and Engineering Fair, who uses the same set of forms. After students submit their project registration, they will receive a confirmation email with or a project identification number email that gives them their project ID number. They'll use this number anytime they're corresponding with fair staff to ask questions, and it's what they will have on the back of their project display and how their projects will be assigned to judges and placed in the fair room at the fair on March 13th. Everybody should check their spam folders when these come through. These are automated emails, which do sometimes get caught in the spam folder. Students will also receive a confirmation email that will include a copy of all of their registration information for their records. It's emailed to students as well as the parent and guardian, and this is of individual students and all team members. It includes a link to complete Form 1B. And again, we encourage everyone to make it a practice to check their spam folder throughout fair season. You're now going to hear me talk about a lot of forms, referring to them with numbers, but we have some visual aids up on the screen as well. Form 1B is the parental/guardian approval form. So this is required from each student. That means if you have a team of a duo or a trio, both or all 3 parents need to sign this form as well. It requires a student signature and a parent guardian signature and must be completed prior to the start of experimentation. So we need to receive this form back before a student can begin their project. It is advisable to let your students know to just watch these emails come in and for the parent to sign off on it then and there as soon as possible. And we also, I'll be talking in a moment about our dashboard that we have created this year so you can track student completion of these various requirements. There is also the checklist for the adult sponsor. Again, in some cases, the adult sponsor may be the parent or guardian. In more cases, it may be a teacher or another adult mentor. This is required one per project. It requires the adult sponsor signature and must be completed prior to the start of experimentation. The adult sponsor who is listed on project registration form will receive a copy of this, will receive a copy of the registration material submitted by the student or students and a link to complete form number 1. This is the email that identified adult sponsors will receive. It has information and directions for them. This also confirms that adult sponsors know they have been listed. We did have an issue last year where someone listed as an adult sponsor had no idea that they were, and this helps prevent that. And they'll get a copy of the registration information that they can review so that they can complete the form. For projects involving humans, vertebrate animals, potentially hazardous biological agents, or substances or materials, the qualified scientist is required. This is Form 2B, which will be completed by that qualified scientist. They will provide their signature here. This also must be completed prior to the start of experimentation. And this qualified scientist will also receive a copy of the registration materials and directions on how to complete this form. And finally, a risk assessment form is required for many projects, not all, but many. Those special situations with humans, vertebrate animals, potentially hazardous biological agents or substances or materials, or if requested by the scientific review committee. This form must be submitted. It requires a qualified scientist signature and must be completed prior to the start of experimentation. And the scientist listed in project registration will receive a copy of this form and the registration material that was submitted to review. There are some less common forms there that may be required for certain projects, but because we don't see these each year, these are the only ones that are remaining as PDFs. And students that have to complete them will be flagged on their dashboard, and we will communicate with them as well to ensure that they provide these forms at the correct time. Most of these forms are post-experimentation. Speaking of post-experiment forms, there is a new form required by ISEF this year. It's called Form 2A, and it is a disclosure of student support. It will require students to list their adult sponsor, direct supervisor, qualified scientist, and any other adults who assisted them. You may be asking yourself, I thought we just put that in the registration form, and you'd be correct. However, if ISEF requests these forms, then we provide these forms to ISEF to ensure that our finalists can compete. It also will ask some additional questions about any support that was provided, paid support, and it will ask about the use of AI and require the disclosure of AI logs. So if you have any students who are using AI on projects, they should be aware of that in advance. Project dashboard, this is in beta currently for this year, but we're hoping this will work out for folks. Using their project ID number, students will be able to check their status to see if they have been approved by the scientific review committee and to ensure that their forms have been received by the folks who need to sign them. So you can see some examples on the screenshot here where it will say incomplete or complete based on whether the appropriate forms have been received back. And this will be available to them. It does require the creation of a free Airtable account to view. It is optional, but it is a good way to make sure that all of the required information has been provided. We still will communicate to students via email the approval status of their projects once they are approved by the scientific review committee as well. A note on the AI policy. Our STEM fair applies ISEF's AI use policy. As educators, I am sure that you are all waging your own classroom level battles with the use of generative AI in schools. ISEF and the fair community is no different. you'll be able to access the ISEF use policy, and we encourage you to spend some time reviewing this policy with your students. ISEF especially takes a very, very close look at finalist projects to ensure that there has been no use of AI that falls outside of their policy. And this year, again, if students are using that, they must submit a log of all of the prompts that they used and be able to explain all of the ways in which it was used. AI may not be used to write a research plan or an abstract, to create a poster or create citations. The largest problem, integrity and ethics issues last year, locally and at ISEF, were hallucinated bibliography entries. So that can be avoided by avoiding AI or by making sure that you're only using it in line with the AI use policy. Additionally, there are some prohibited projects. I will not read this entire slide, but the ones that come up the most often, there are wild cultures of any fungi, including the growing of mold at home. So, let's see which slice of bread molds the fastest, are not permitted in the fair. You don't know what you're growing. The kids don't know what they've collected, and it can present a health hazard. Studies using prions or commercially available purified prion-like proteins are prohibited. That's usually something that's going to come up for our high school students. And no primary or secondary cultures taken from humans or other warm-blooded animals may be used. This is detailed in our handbook as well and on the project registration worksheet. And as ever, if you or your students have questions about what is allowed, please reach out to us. Human participant projects, as mentioned, even if a student is only surveying or experimenting on themselves, that they are a human, and therefore it is still a human participant project. There is a template for research plans involving human participants, and things to keep in mind: if a student wishes to survey fellow students under age 18, informed consent forms must be signed by the parent or guardian of those that they want to participate. We discourage strongly the testing of substances on other students. Last year, we had a couple of projects that wanted to test the effects of caffeine on other students. And that's only permitted if each participating student receives a medical clearance from their doctor, because testing substances on people can be dangerous. We encourage everyone to read the rules carefully. So I've referred several times to the Scientific Review Committee. What is that and who are they? That is a committee of professionals and academics who review every project. They look for compliance with the rules, complete information, a complete materials list, and safety concerns. Scientific Review Committee approval is required for all projects. Certain projects require that prior to experimentation, which we have discussed earlier in the presentation. The Scientific Review Committee may also flag issues generally and will always give students a chance to correct those issues. So it's another reason to make sure that students are checking their email and provided an email that we can send correspondence to. The most common issues that were flagged last year were a lack of a testing process for an engineering design project. So students saying, I'm just going to build this thing, but then not explaining how they were going to test it or what kind of quality outcomes they were looking for. References to others being involved in the work who weren't listed as a sponsor or a qualified scientist, like kids who use we a lot when describing things. Even if they mean I, if they've used we assume we means more than one person, and there can't be anybody helping them that's not disclosed. Incomplete materials lists. So there are, of course, an increasing number of projects that use data sets. They're not using test tubes, but a data set is a material that is being used. A computer is being used to look at the material. So no project has no materials. All projects have something that's being used. Human subject projects not being treated as human subject projects. So I'm experimenting on myself. You're a human, so you got to complete that part of the registration process. Incorrect or incomplete data set attribution, or incomplete or missing safety plans or risk assessment. I would say the single most common request for additional information was to have students complete a risk assessment form or provide material safety data sheets to ensure that they are aware of what the materials they're using might present in terms of risk. So it's common for students' projects to evolve, right? They've made their research plan, they've done the best they can, and then when it comes time to actually start doing the thing, they realize they have to change the material or something's not available, or there's just something else that has caused them to rethink things. And that's completely fine. However, students must track those changes between what was approved and what they are actually going to do. And if the project changes significantly, and significantly is a subjective word, but I would say think about that word conservatively, the student needs to submit a research plan addendum. There is an online portal to do that this year. And that just ensures that when they show up on fair day, the project that they set up a poster board for is the same project that was reviewed and approved by the scientific review committee. So if it has changed a whole bunch and it's no longer recognizable, it will be disqualified from competition. All right, so what resources are available? We have a revised student handbook this year. We have the project registration worksheet, which I showed earlier, and we have a lot of automated confirmation emails. And it's important to tell students to find and save these. They are proof of timely registration. If a student doesn't receive it, then they're probably not registered. And we also have our project status tracker. So how can we simplify this for students to ensure that more students can participate? I would say the best way to assist your students is to dive in and review the handbook and the project registration worksheet and rules in advance, and then to look at our pre-approval flow chart. Think about topics, designs, and hypotheses, and then avoid and counsel your students to avoid projects that involve human participants or potentially hazardous biological agents, vertebrate animals, or materials, right? There is a world of scientific discovery out there that doesn't require mold or cells or testing polluted water. And students should be encouraged to find those other topics. It saves a lot of the forms that need to be done without sacrificing the process learning and the scientific discovery that exists outside of those projects. And also a note that middle school projects cannot be performed at a regulated research institute this year. It doesn't happen often, but it's a resource that is not available to most middle school students. So in the interest of equity and having as level a fair playing field as possible, that higher level research can be saved for high school. All right, let's talk about what happens to these projects after they are submitted and when our students show up to the fair. Each project is judged against a rubric. They are not judged against each other. The rubrics are going to take into consideration the presentation of the project by the student. Do they understand it? Did they do this project? That comes across really quickly when they are being interviewed. The creativity in the project. So did they find a novel topic to research? Have they come up with a new and creative engineering design? The research question that they pursued, their design and their methodology. So how did they set up their project or their design? How did they go through it? How rigorously did they test it? How many times did they test it? How reliable are the results? And then their execution of the entire project. We have a panel of volunteer judges every year that judge our awards. They are all experts in their fields. They are paired with categories based on their educational and professional background. And they're evaluating and focusing on whether the student followed the scientific process or the engineering process. They're looking at the detail in the project log or data book. They're looking at whether the experiment that was designed is actually testing the hypothesis well, or if the prototype tested and fulfilled the design. They're looking at how the project might affect its field, and how thorough the students were and how well planned it was. And we do have more information on preparing for the judges' interviews in our student handbook. Students will meet with at least 3 judges. The judges may interview the students individually or as a panel of 3. It depends on the judge's number of assigned projects that day at the fair. Students may also be interviewed by special award judges, and I'll talk more about special awards in a moment. The top projects in each category in our high school division will be visited by grand awards judges, so they'll be interviewed again by another 1 or 3 judges. So it's really important for students to stay at their project. They should bring a book or homework. There may be a lot of waiting because of the number of projects, the number of judges. We're not able to give students a precise time, like at 9:06, you're going to talk to Judge A, and at 9:45, you're talking to Judge B. We wouldn't be able to adhere to that schedule. It would fall apart really quickly. So we encourage students to bring a book or practice their interview with their neighbors to the left, right, in front, and behind them. And the best way to prepare, of course, is to practice as often as possible to anybody who will listen to you in advance of the fair. Awards and opportunities at our fair. We give awards in all of our 7 categories in both the middle school and high school division. There are a number of special awards each year that are provided to projects that meet certain criteria. The special awards vary from year to year. There are a number of them that are provided to regional fairs from ISEF, and we have some from our local sponsors as well. Some of these special awards are quite precise. So for example, they are awards given by professional organizations to projects from young women in grades 11. Some of them are quite broad, and any project that deals with chemistry or with biology is eligible. We don't know yet what the special awards in 2027 will be, but last year we had about 18 of them in total. Some come with monetary prizes or subscriptions or memberships to professional societies. Some come with certificates or swag. From our fair, there's also the opportunity to become a finalist for the California State Science and Engineering Fair. Tentative date for that is April 10th and 11th. It usually takes place in Southern California in the Thousand Oaks area. It was at the campus of Cal Lutheran last year. We don't have confirmation on the location yet, but the first place finishers in each category in our high school and middle school divisions will be eligible to participate in CSEF, and then a number of second place projects. We have to find out what our allotment is in each year. The State Science Fair tells us how many we are able to send, so we will know that in the spring. Our middle school students, also the top 10% of the finishers, are eligible to be nominated for the Thermo Fisher Junior Innovators Challenge. If you finish in the top 10%, we send the name to Thermo Fisher Junior Innovators Challenge, and then those students are eligible to apply for that challenge. They select about 30 people nationwide for a week in Washington, D.C., with a lot of STEM innovation challenges in education. That is a great opportunity that those students can apply for. And then we have the Regeneron International Science and Engineering Fair. That will be May 9th to 14th in Los Angeles in the spring. We send 3 finalists, our first, second, and third place grand award winners, and all travel and expenses are covered for that. I'm pleased to share that last year, our 2026 fair, or earlier this year, our 3 finalists represented the region wonderfully. All 3 of them received grand awards. We had 2 third place and a 4th place in categories and 1 special award winner. And we were one of the few teams from the entire world where 100% of the team received grand awards. So we're a good fair. We're very competitive projects. All right, important dates. So registration is open. Like I said, student account creation is open now. I would encourage you to have your students who are interested in participating create their student account now so they're ready to go. November 13th is the registration deadline for projects requiring pre-experiment approval. Can't say it strongly enough. If you would like to tell your students, all of them, to meet that date, that would be great. They'll have even more time to work on their projects. They'll have their approval in hand very early. For students who submit their registration by November 13th, we will get them their approval or status notification from the Scientific Review Committee by November 20th. January 31st, project registration closes for projects that don't require pre-approval. And then for those projects, we will notify them of their approval status by February 12th. February 19th is our deadline for any changes to the project title, any changes to the abstract, any research plan addenda, their Form 2A, which was that student support form, and any additional post-experimentation forms. Our judges' registration closes on March 1st, and the STEM fair will take place on March 13th, with projects set up taking place on Friday, March 12th in the late afternoon. All right, with that, I will open it up to questions. If you have any questions, feel free to put that in the chat or raise your hand, and be happy to answer them. I'm also happy to run through the full registration cycle on the screen if you would like to watch that. You are welcome to create your own student account and go through and fill in your own, using your name and your account that you create. You're welcome to fill in your own mock project registration and just, write the word test in every field. So you get a feel for it. If you put in your own email address, you'll get the confirmation emails that go out to the various folks who are involved in the project as well.
I have a few questions. Some of my students already passed along. I heard that you said that if the request for approval get in by November 13th, the student will hear back by November 20th. Is that no matter when they all come November 20th, or could a student receive approval a lot earlier than that if they submit early?
Yeah, that's a great question. Yes, they definitely can receive approval earlier. Our goal, or the Scientific Review Committee's goal, is to return all determinations within 7 days of the submission. Um, we just have a date certain for that November 13th for the folks who wait until the last minute. But yeah, if they are ready to go and they'd like to turn it in now, we will do our best to get that decision back quickly to them.